Hi everybody, Dave Rauch here from ProTec Building Services, another edition of the Maintenance Manager, and I'm here today with Stan Luhr. And Stan has two companies actually, Pacific Property Consultants and AxisPointe.
Yes, indeed.
And I think one of the things that many people don't know is that Stan was one of the founders of ProTec back in February of 1996.
Gosh.
A short 27 years ago.
You're dating us, Dave. You're dating us.
So anyhow, Stan, you know, after we started ProTec, you went on to found another really cool company, Quality Build. Can you tell us about that? And I think that was about a year after ProTec.
Yeah, Quality Build actually started as an idea in the 1993 time period, but we were really doing it part of our forensic sciences side. And it was kind of the result of all that frustration, you know, in the industry. We had tons and tons of litigation. Homeowners are suing builders, and for likely good reasons. You know, balcony decks and roofs were leaking. We really did have a lot of poor quality back then. And we saw a need. You know, meeting you at BIA meetings and all the other fun stuff, you know, very professional appearances back then. But we started thinking, you know, how can we solve this problem? And that was really the beginning of the Quality Built focus. And we started really very simply, just like we did at ProTec, you know. Let's open up a checkbook. Let's tell the whys we're starting this company. And gosh, it's just I'm so proud of what you have done with the company. And ProTec is such a really well-respected entity. Every time I see trucks running up and down the highways, I'm like, yeah, I was a little tiny part of that.
Well, the feeling's mutual. You know, Quality Built became a really big, successful company, and then you moved on and got involved in AxisBuilt, and you're running that now. And Pacific Property Consultants, which is, I think, the forensic arm, I think, is very successful too. But going back, yes, the clearest sign to me back then was, I think it was 1999. Yes, 1999, there were only 2,000 condos built in the entire state of California because insurance companies would not insure developers to build condos. And
exactly.
So that was the problem.
Well, we really saw it in '94. I read a little insurance blog that said, we don't anticipate getting any coverage or capacity for insuring builders to build attached housing. And, you know, this was a revelation. The builders didn't even know it because they don't really pay attention to insurance newsletters. So we thought, my God, we have got to really get ahead of this. If we don't eliminate and start reducing the quality aspects of the bad construction and get some of these bad builders out of the industry, we're doomed. We're really doomed. And the forensic side, as much as I love litigation and I love trying to solve problems of leaky buildings and moldy houses, it really isn't the best way to deal with a societal problem. And so that was really the birth of Quality Built back then. You know, the history kind of shows it pretty well. We built that company up to about 600 people and inspections all around the country. And we really made a major impact on quality, not just going out and doing inspections, but teaching builders, this is what will happen if you flash this window incorrectly. And at the same time, building up ProTec to take on that preventive maintenance aspect, which didn't exist before. And so I'm really proud of what we did pretty much as a team, you know, hit them in all these different directions, really get that idea across that if you spend, you know, $200 this week on painting a railing, you will eliminate that $10,000, you know, rusted out railing, and worse off, that potential that someone leans against that railing, falls 15 feet to their death. And I still, as a forensic expert, I see that all the time. Just had a case where someone fell 15 feet off a balcony deck in just south of Salt Lake City. And so you see it all the time, and you go up there and you go, gee, you know, it's all rusted to heck. And
God, well, we're gonna get to balcony decks and 326 in a minute, but for our audience who's not familiar with third-party QC, quality control, you know, Stan, I think your company, Quality Built, was wasn't it the first company in the country to actually go out and help builders identify, checkpoints where where typical problems would occur? Could you just talk for a minute about QC, third-party QC?
The idea that the insurance industry was collapsing, we came up with this idea that what if we really spotlight some builders that are doing things right? What if we can put some controls in place that would allow a builder to kind of stand out and maybe get some insurance coverage? That didn't happen in 1994, even though we started that program. I spent a year and a half building and working throughout the industry. And finally, in 1995, towards the end of 1995, we got our very first Centex Homes condominium project out in Scottsdale. It was Centex was being sued left and right. Virtually every project they built, they were being sued on. And they're like, well, we got nothing else to lose. Let's try Stan, see if this works. And surprisingly, years and years later, I got a call from one of the Centex people who said, you know what? Out of all the projects that we built over the years, that first project, we never had any litigation on. So it really was a testament, not only from the builders, but the insurance industry. And we analyzed every one of our checkpoints to determine that we could calculate the amount of savings by, I think, about 2008, 2009 time period. We had over $7 billion worth of risk eliminated. That's $7 billion worth of leaky windows that weren't existing on projects and balcony decks that didn't have the potential to kill people, because our ability to teach builders how to do things right actually had that quality metric, that analysis and that data alongside of it. So that's what we were able to measure it back then.
And I remember, but Quality Built, and I think AxisPointe also does other things too. In other words, in addition to going out and identifying the checkpoints, the points where problems could occur, you also reviewed plans beforehand, so pre-construction. And I think you did some other things too to help builders build higher quality homes so there wasn't so much litigation.
Yeah, remember the old days where we're sitting on the panels at the BIA shows and all of that, trying to educate people about how important it was to have preventive maintenance and to have processes in place. You know, we've coined a lot of phrases that I love when consultants and competitors repeat what we say. You know, they try to repeat what we do.
Remember that?
And they're like, oh, I'm going to use that. But really, one of the terms that I see all the time now is the chaos of construction. You know, people have finally started to understand that building a condo project is really, at best, controlled chaos. There really aren't the processes that you would expect to have if you were building that product inside a warehouse factory with your own employees, all trained to do a specific thing. The construction site is chaotic. It's out there in the dirt. You throw hundreds of tons of raw materials out there and expect these people that you don't even employ directly and don't even know their names to somehow come up with a finished product. Without process, it is chaos. And as a result, we end up with basically, at best, the ability to kind of control that to the end and then hand it over to the HOA and say, here you go. So it is really important to be able to look at the buildings and predict potential failures, look at high-risk components. It's critical to have that experience in the field after construction to say, you know what, I see a little tiny bit of peeling paint at the bottom of this window. Let's take a little bit of time and let's try to figure out if it's leaking or not. And I think that's where people miss the value of services like ProTec. They don't understand that tiny investment now will relate in an incredible savings of money and potential risk. The potential for people tripping on a sidewalk, the potential for sprinklers not being adjusted. I mean, it just goes on and on. There are all of these risks that our insurance industry protects us by, but it doesn't eliminate the person falling and breaking their hip and dying of COVID while they're in the hospital. Those are the human tragedies of lack of maintenance, of lack of responsibility out on the projects.
And interestingly, and I haven't told you this, but I'm working with CAI National, the Foundation for Community Association Research, headed by CAI Executive Director or Head of Government Affairs, Don Bauman.
Okay.
as well as Adrian Adams, who's on the committee. But we're working on best practices on maintenance, and I'd love to share that with you at some point. But going back to what you were saying earlier, and that is the prefab home, you know, I'm sure you've been following that modular housing is actually growing in scope in the United States, as well as, I don't know if you've probably been following the 3D printing.
Oh, yeah.
Of homes. I
The
mean,
stuff shoots out of a hose and you glob it on and
well, they
have fun stuff.
They're actually building a whole community now of 3D printed homes, which, you know, I actually would love to go see that occur because it's just so crazy. We tried to recommend building concrete homes before, remember?
We tried, you know, I've been a proponent for modular housing and really process housing for, almost my whole 40-year career. And, you know, in looking at when I started as a small hometown builder, you know, I had to understand that these were all chaotic events and that, you know, I got to get the subcontractors there at the right time and they've got to be properly equipped and they have to have the right responsibility. So looking into how you can develop a nearly perfect home in a factory has always been a goal of mine.
Yes.
It's not there yet. We are seeing tremendous problems in the field, so it's not really a perfected science. We have a project right now that's over a year old, sitting in the dirt, waiting for their panels to arrive. A year after they started.
Supply chain issues?
The supplier just cannot build the product. And as a result now, the builder has his project sitting fallow. He's lost his insurance. Now he has to get a second policy. So it's not panacea just yet.
No, it's you know, both the HOA industry and the building industry are difficult industries. So much change. And as you know, there's that cycle with the building industry, 3 years up, 3 years down, based on interest rates. And right now we're in a period of increasing interest rates, decreasing home buying. And, you know, I'm sure you're seeing builders idle some of their projects and land now. You had a very difficult time with Quality Built in 2009, the Great Recession, they call it. Everybody did. I lost a lot of business in South County and up in Inland Empire. But what lessons if any, have you learned that you're going into this recession that's coming next year in 2023, if any, that you're bringing to bear? Any thoughts for anybody?
What a loaded question that is.
Down the hatches?
I would say, you know, the recession of 08, 09 was my fourth recession. I had no expectations it could be so bad because we had lived through recessions in the early, 90s and so on. It was the only recession that was kind of like shook the industry to its absolute core. But it also was kind of a worldwide recession where there was no escape. And I think that was the biggest lesson. We all lost millions of dollars in contracts. In 1 year, I lost $76 million of executed non-cancelable contracts. So it's hard for you to predict that as a businessman. It's hard to, but the hardest part was taking, 600 people that you love dearly and saying, I have to cut 150 people by this Friday. I have to cut 62 people. And then it's like, I hope that's enough, but it wasn't enough. And it just got worse and worse and worse. I think the true lesson for me was you cannot really possibly predict something like that. If you did, you would never be able to grow like what we did at Quality Built. We went from an idea to $25 million a year in business. We were exclusive agents to hundreds of insurance programs and processes. And then in 08, 09, the industry just started retracting. And there was nothing you could do about it. When Lennar Homes comes to you and says, we have $11 million of current business and we want you to refund us 50% of that gross margin, when you only have a few percent even there as profit, it becomes a real difficult situation. And I can politely say that Lennar will never be a client of AxisPointe. So that's one lesson I've learned. The family builders stood true to us. It goes back to really the culture of the people that you do business with. And I think when you create good relationships, solid relationships, they survive the test of time. Hundreds of builders, as soon as I sold Quality Built, asked me where I was going. I mean, I had that support. I didn't have it with any of the corporate friends and acquaintances, but it was the small hometown builder that had his name on the door across the country that we still do business with today. And they build phenomenal quality homes compared to the big production builders. So I can say, you know, you make your bed, you decide who you work with, and with AxisPointe, I have the luxury of not having to work with corporate clients that I don't really want to work with.
And like you, Stan, being your age, I've been through those previous recessions too, and we both know that that was not a normal recession, the Great Recession. That was not based on raising interest rates and the building market collapsing. That was based on Wall Street. Absolutely, it was based on Wall Street taking cues from government telling Wall Street that they had to make mortgages to people that were totally unqualified. That was a seismic problem that occurred in '09. I hope it doesn't happen again, because that was ugly. It was really ugly, and it hurt a lot of people. And again, I look at government as being responsible for that, for allowing the bonding agencies to bond those, you know, mortgage portfolios. It's just terrible.
I agree with that. I think you know, when you look back at that, it started really in the Clinton era, and the good intentions of government leading to really bad results and outcomes. And the good intention was, we need more diversity in people buying houses. We need more blacks and Hispanics. It seems like there are some barriers, so let's reduce those barriers. Let's not require someone to identify where their income comes from. And as a result, you had these no documentation loans. The derivatives, you know, came from there. The mortgages got quickly sold. If any mortgage company was loaning money and had to keep that in their portfolio, they would have never done it. So I think unfortunately, when you had people that could not even qualify, never made their first payment, they just were getting a house for free.
And so let's go ahead and leave the past.
We'll
leave
let's
the past
try to put that
and
under
move forward to today, and we're looking at a sizable potential recession next year. It really depends, in my opinion, on the price of fuel and oil and gas. Which is undecided right now, because they're pumping oil out of the strategic reserves, and we really don't know what the market is telling us. But anyhow, I think the recession that's coming next year is going to be a more typical recession, unless something bad happens. China invades Taiwan. Russia, you know, has to send some tactical nuclear weapons to Ukraine or something like that. You know, that could always happen, but in my opinion, it's going to be a typical recession. I don't think it's going to be a soft landing, but I think the home building industry is battening down the hatches right now.
And well, we're seeing some builders have called us and said, we're just putting this project on hold for 6 months. And then we're also having builders just going like crazy, saying, now that the supply chain is finally caught up, let's build these houses, because next year the supply chain is going to collapse again. So I'm hearing it from both perspectives.
It's weird, isn't it?
And I don't know. I mean, anytime I see the government telling us what we're expecting, I don't believe it. I don't really believe the government is going to be correct in predicting this heavy, you know, significant recession. I think the stock market even today is kind of showing that, down 700-800 points. Not a big deal. It's coming right back up. I think that there's so much money out there. Somebody told me that there's over $4 trillion of cash sitting on the sidelines, just waiting for an investment opportunity. I know, like you, I probably get calls every day from M&A bankers and brokers saying, we have buyers for your company.
Every day.
So there's all this money, and they don't know what to do with it. And I think as a result of that, I'm maybe a little more optimistic. I'm looking at the whole industry as a whole making major transformations. One of the huge transformations I'm seeing that's very subtle right now is your ability as a homeowner or a condo owner to be able to manage your whole energy portfolio. Enphase, for example, is a company that I've been following that's very interesting. They've invented an inverter that allows you to island your entire electrical grid separate and apart from the grid that you're connected to.
Oh, really?
So you, in the future, can decide, do I purchase SoCal Edison or San Diego Gas and Electric's electricity at 52 cents a kilowatt? No, the electrical algorithms will be, I can turn on my gas-powered generator at 40 cents, and I'm going to run that for 6.2 hours. And then when I'm going to turn that off and then have my energy solar panels kick in, store that energy and sell it back at appropriate times. So I'm seeing a whole transformation of management in energy. It's going to be very interesting.
I'm actually glad you're here. I was thinking of asking you this question too, is you've heard that California is switching off the gas.
Yes.
A lot of cities, I think, and I think maybe even the state itself has said you're not going to be able to build any more homes or buildings and with gas.
Yeah.
And all has to be electric. Is that true? And what's your thoughts on that?
It is
what's going to happen?
It is a government motivation, but all of a sudden, for the last 35 years, we've been on committees. You and I have, sat there with people far smarter than us, saying this is the green energy code, and this is going to help us save the environment. It's all hogwash. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but it's really all about how to preserve the monopolies of the utility companies. And again, in San Diego County, we're facing another 8% utility increase at the beginning of next year. It makes no sense to take a clean energy source that's wildly abundant and suddenly say it's not really good and we're going to take it away from you and you're not going to be allowed to buy gas appliances. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
The bottom line is that San Diego Gas and Electric, here where I live, generates 31% of their electricity burning natural gas. But natural gas is somehow bad for me as a homeowner to turn on and fry my eggs.
But it doesn't make any sense. And why can't somebody put this in the newspaper and explain this to the citizens of California? I just don't get it. But before we get any more frustrated, because it is frustration.
That's right.
Let's slip on to 326, SB 326, the California deck inspection law. As you know, it came out for apartments first, and it was based on the Berkeley deck collapse. And from what we're seeing and hearing, the inspections themselves are extremely expensive. Boards are having a real hard time digesting that expense, let alone the maintenance and repair or even the rebuilding of all those decks. So I just wanted to see if you've been having anything to do with this law and decks.
Yes, absolutely. When a deck leaks in California, for example, you end up with immediate litigation because it's got really a 10-year statute. Under our right to repair contractor laws, balcony deck leakage causing, unintended water into a building is actionable. So therefore, it's a no-win situation. It's how many decks leak? Well, we think all of them. And on the defense side, we've surveyed all of them. We see only evidence of 10 or 20%. The insurance companies come in and somehow settle the difference. The reality is it's really expensive, and it's because it's mainly because builders have not yet come into the design aspects of how to make it accessible without drilling through the stucco and all the expenses that a forensic engineer has to do. So in our plan reviews on the construction side, we're encouraging builders and architects to design in removable louvers. That raises another problem. Removable louvers create 1-hour fire-resistive construction issues. And if you have a car that catches on fire outside a condo building and it goes through that louver, it burns the whole condo down. So there's always cause and effect that you have to marry and match. My suggestion is that there are some products out in the marketplace that are expensive, 1-hour rated louvers, but that perfect product of being able to retrofit a 1-hour resistive louver in the soffit after you've done your borescope inspection. This doesn't really exist yet. It's a perfect opportunity for manufacturing to get back in there. And at the next builder show, I'll be meeting with some louver manufacturers and give them these ideas. You know, these are things that every year we have relationships with product manufacturers, and that's where the true innovation comes from. You have incredible opportunities to understand how buildings fail, and yet all that experience and information is rarely transferred to people who can actually help, you know, resolve it. And so at the builder show, we do that. We walk around, we talk to people there and say, this is what the industry needs. The industry for energy needs fire sprinklers that don't leak 20 CFM of air at 50 pascals. You know, we need fire resistive assemblies. We need the opportunity to have more corrosion resistant fasteners for pressure treated lumber and all of these kinds of things that people just don't really think about because they're not seeing the failures on your side and the litigation on our side.
Yep, and innovation never stops.
No.
It's just the ideas have to take hold, get traction, and push the economics of it. So I'm glad you're still working on that.
Yeah,
on the building science side of things.
It's the fun part.
It's fun, but it's frustrating too because it takes so many years to get ideas to get traction.
Well, my house, just as an aside, built in 1989. There was no such thing as self-adhered flashings for windows and penetrations on buildings. Everything was building paper back then. And I went to a manufacturer and I said, I want to take your product and I want to stick it around a bunch of windows. And they thought I was crazy. And now that's a multi-million-dollar industry. I took that idea, went to 2 or 3 manufacturers, got them to cut some membranes down. And as a result now, this industry exists.
Now, did you get a letter of thanks?
No, you never get any thanks. But 15 years ago, we did the same thing with fluid-applied membranes. You know, if you can apply a fluid-applied membrane and make an excellent balcony deck waterproofing surface, why can't we use the same technology behind the stucco around a window? And so I started developing them.
Fluid applied, you mean it comes in a can and or you spray it on?
Just like a paint, you know,
just like a
thick sour cream consistency, kind of like a Dura liner in your truck bed, this product. And now, 15 years later, we have manufacturers that are releasing some fantastic products that are so easy to apply. They eliminate half an hour to 45 minutes per window in just the installation alone. So I'm always excited about the technology. We're really at its infancy, you know, and the ability to replace a window. Describe for me how hard it is to replace a window. Wouldn't it be great to snap it out and just snap one back in?
The big problem is the stucco. But anyhow, so that is fascinating. You are working on SB 326 and how to build a better deck. I love that idea of a fluid applied membrane. What a great idea.
And also the intersection between the sliding glass door, which is where most of the leakage occurred.
The threshold.
If you study all the historical failures that we've had, and Berkeley got a lot of investigations, but the outcome was really the wrong outcome. It was really defective maintenance that caused that collapse. It wasn't original construction like they blamed. The HOA largely was responsible for allowing additional coatings and membranes to appear without flashing them into the wall. And that just allowed this insidious water to get in and rot.
Geez, what a great segue to our final subject, which is the Champlain Towers collapse in Surfside, Florida. And, you know, I think you and I both know that maintenance is responsible for that collapse. Lack of maintenance, lack of maintenance plan, lack of a maintenance manual, lack of a maintenance program.
Absolutely.
Regular inspections, regular maintenance is what caused that collapse. But that's hard to digest for the industry. The industry doesn't want to think that. The industry wants to think, and the federal government's doing a huge investigation, you know, forensic investigation that's going to take until 2024, I've heard, to say, oh no, it was these posts, or it was the columns weren't spec'd correctly, or there was, you know, too much weight on this penthouse on the roof. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that building lasted for 40 years somehow. So if it had been built defectively, and there I'm sure there was some defective components in there, but not enough to cause it to collapse because it lasted 40 years.
Sure, in a harsh environment.
Salt water, salt air.
Yeah.
You know, you can't pick a more difficult environment for a building than salt and corrosion and constant application of water.
The humidity,
water is the enemy.
Absolutely.
So,
and for those that are watching this podcast, I would urge you to understand that when you see rust oozing out of a column and it's dripping down the wall, and then the next symptom is the cracks on the surface, right? The alligator cracking is a symptom that rebar is starting to swell. You know, a piece of half-inch rebar will swell 200 times its size when it rusts. So the concrete doesn't have a chance. When you see that in your project, those are red flags. And this
red sirens. Red sirens.
And they had all these red flags. They ignored them because the homeowners complained and complained and complained and did not want to spend the money to fix it.
Exactly.
So there wasn't anybody strong enough that I believe that could go to the homeowners and say, look, this building will collapse. You need to invest this amount of money. And I think that is going to come out that the HOA did have the knowledge and the ability to relay that information, but they took no action or insufficient action before the collapse occurred.
And I do agree with that, but I also feel that the board was not given the proper information at the inception of the building. Sure. In other words, if the developer had said, hey, this is a very difficult building to maintain because of all the common areas. And if you don't maintain it correctly, this thing's going to have problems, and it's going to be 10 times more expensive to fix things than it is to just maintain it. So here's a maintenance manual. This is how you maintain it. This is what you need to do it. You need 2 full-time engineers to be doing all the inspections and all the maintenance in that maintenance manual. So in other words, a maintenance program.
Sure.
So
and adjust it every so many years as the need arises.
Exactly.
It's not a static book. You can't predict how this building will perform 20 years from now. So that relationship with your maintenance people, your on-site people, they all have to have eyes open. They all have to continue to get good training. But they can't be afraid to see, the bad stuff. And there was some bad stuff going on there for years and years before the collapse.
But they have to be educated on the simple, plain truth, which is that as buildings age, as people age, they start to get creaky, things start to break, wear down. It's just a natural process, and the boards have to be educated. And that's my problem, is that there's no required education for boards of directors, as well as, the developers don't really set them up correctly because they want to keep the cost of the assessments low to be able to make a broader spectrum of buyers. So that fact that buildings have to be maintained and set up correctly is just, to me, the tragedy of Champlain Towers. I just wonder if you see it any differently, or if maybe I'm missing something.
No, it's a combination of events, and I think if people think that building is an anomaly, think again. We see it all the time. My company, on our forensic side, we do risk analysis for insurance underwriting. So when an underwriter is a little bit concerned about a high-rise tower, an office building, whatever, they call for a risk assessment.
Right.
When we go out and look at this stuff, it's everywhere. Just like, some of the classic defects of the last several decades, polybutylene tubing and wafer wood siding and all of these kinds of product-related defects, they still exist. And occasionally we find still, Chinese drywall still is occurring and causing corrosion issues on high-rise projects. It pays to have a great relationship with someone who is on the maintenance side that's not interested in selling you this $500,000 roof, but can say, look, if we put in a maintenance program now, we can probably extend the life of this $500,000 investment a little bit longer. Had we started earlier, then it would have been a greater payoff. That's a hard sell, and I think that's what makes ProTec so unique, because there's nobody else really in the industry doing that.
Well, thanks for that, Stan. I appreciate it. The hard sell, the hard thing to explain is the savings. So unless something breaks and have to be replaced, and you have a repair bill or a replacement bill, you can't calculate the savings.
Yeah.
But we know that there's a 10 to 50x savings with maintenance versus replacement. But it's different with every component. But I want to go back to what you were saying and just buttress what you were saying, which is there was another building called Renaissance in South Carolina. I don't know if you read about that one. That had to be evacuated. Same sort of thing. Concrete was spalling because the salt air had rusted the rebar inside. And then there was another building at a mile and a third, actually, from Champlain Towers that had to be evacuated too. I think that was called La Playa. I forget the name. But again, those two buildings are just, there's thousands of these high rises along the coast of the eastern U.S., thousands in Florida. So my hope is that Champlain Towers doesn't happen again. And it is unusual for a building to collapse, right? I mean,
it's highly unusual. Even when it's on fire, it's hard for a building like that to ever collapse.
But these insidious, invisible problems don't go away.
Absolutely.
Even though if a building doesn't collapse, those problems are still there. So.
Absolutely. We see construction-related deficiencies all the time. If you look at Las Vegas, the Harmon Towers, multi-million-dollar project had to be torn to the ground because of a structural design calculation error that wasn't discovered to the 26th floor.
Yeah.
There was too much rebar and too little of a concrete column. Whose fault
Millennium, too. In
Millennium,
San Francisco. Look
still
at that.
sinking to this day. Hundreds of millions of dollars of liability and risk. And so I guess when you look at it and you're on a board of directors, I think people have to understand the impact of that. It is a huge responsibility. If you're not qualified, don't run. If you don't want to learn and be educated, don't be on the board. It is not a position of notoriety. It's a hard, thankless job. But you need to be educated and you need to throw out all your biases and all of your weaknesses, strengthen them by surrounding yourself with excellence. Excellent contractors, excellent quality control people, whoever you can get within your organization, people that think analytically as opposed to emotionally when they want to be on the board. I would highly recommend that you seek out professional assistance. I really don't believe that a bunch of homeowners should be responsible for a $500 million asset without some education.
Stan, I can't think of any better advice to end this program with than that right there. That is fantastic.
It's tough to say, but it's really important. I would not trust my portfolio to someone who's just, and not to disparage anybody, but you can't learn construction by watching a YouTube video. just as much as, these home improvement shows, and my wife is guilty of that. She watches home improvements of how you transform a house in 100 days and it's in a half an hour segment. And I said, just come on out to my shop and you can see me working in cabinets and stuff. She's like, no, you get it done in a year. I want to see it done in a half an hour. So no, rely on expert advice, and you got to be a tough, analytical person to really be an effective board member. That's going to protect the asset.
Great advice, and I hope you'll come back and we'll dig into some of these things in a little more length,
Sure.
And Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas so much, to you. I'm so proud of what you guys have done. Keep up the great work.
Vice versa. Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe.